Say a little Dr. Cool.
Thank you, I will.
So, folks, we have a real treat now. I mean, if you haven't been treated already, hearing four octogenarians plus Patricia and their great stories, now we're going to have two of the people that are real special in my life. Okay, and I'll introduce them individually, and then I'll turn the call over to my esteemed colleague and my older sister, Dr. Nancy Celini. Dr. Celini has also been a person who has adopted Blue Zone living throughout her life. Actually, she adopted it long before I did. She was always an inspiration to me, the way that she ate. She always has eaten right, exercised, yoga, ride her bike, keep her weight down, do everything else according to plan. And she is, well, I won't take her age either, because I keep forgetting, we can talk age with guys. Guys aren't sensitive about this. Women might be. So it's up to her if she wants to. And then in addition to Dr. Celini, who will interview her special guest and our special guest, and that is one of the three founders of Immunotech Research, our good friend John Molson. And a little bit about John, if you're not familiar with John Molson. John has been literally rode shotgun with Dr. Bunos for the first, roughly 12 to 15 years of the company's existence, and probably knows more about this product than anybody, right from the words of Dr. Bunos, because all the time they spent together and all the education Dr. Bunos gave him. But John, if you know John, John is just a steward of this information. He is like a walking encyclopedia of all things Immunical. Of course, you're probably familiar with the Molson family, owners of the Montreal Canadian hockey team, sponsors of a number of different sporting events in Canada, and also philanthropists in the province of Quebec for many, many years, and really are, if not certainly one of the most famous business families in the country of Canada. And I got to tell you, I have not been able to succeed the 25 years that I've been here without his help and guidance, and just an amazing individual. So anyway, I am going to turn the call over to Dr. Nancy Celini, and she will interview John. Nancy, take it away.
Thank you, John. And hi, everyone. Happy, healthy new year. I just want to say it's wonderful to be with my Immunical tribe today, and mostly with my dear brother, who is younger. I'm not embarrassed to tell you all, I am 66 years old and still kicking butts and taking names later. So, and Immunical has been a super big part of that. But just in terms of the opening question, John, I think it was very important, because we sometimes don't realize all the things we do in a given day that can contribute to our physical health. And today my workout started with cleaning my 4-story, rather modest home. Nonetheless, it's pretty big when you clean it, with some very technical devices known as a dust mop, a broom, and a dust rag. And if you haven't cleaned your house lately, I'm going to tell you, it's a great form of exercise. But my more formal exercise always includes a cardio circuit that's anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. I am a yogi and a yoga teacher, so I love what Patricia said about having her yoga mat always close. I always have a yoga component just about every day I get to my mat, even if it's 15 minutes, to be honest. And I round that all out with attempting Wim Hof and going in the cold water. And I end my workout circuit every day with a beautiful sauna. So that's my little workout routine. But again, I don't discount things like running after my 3-year-old granddaughter. That is a labor of love. I do that 2 days a week on top of everything else. So moving, breathing naturally, which is part of the Blue Zone research, is critically important. And you mentioned some of them already on this call. We can garden, we can rake, we can be outstanding in our fields, Keith, and be farmers, even here in New Jersey. But anyway, I'm honored to do this segment in this fascinating discussion today about blue zones. And I'm going to bring on our expert and my dear friend and our colleague, John Molson, in a moment. But I wanted to just lay out and touch on a couple other things. As you know, I'm usually the research spot, along with John being our scientific and amongst other topics, practical knowledge, elite athlete source of information. And I've put a couple of references in the chat for you all already, because I think it's important when we look at blue zones, and I used that word tribe before. That's actually in the blue zone research. And what is a tribe and why is it important? Well, tribes are people who have social cohesion. And you've heard me talk about that term before in public health. So can we create our own blue zone? Yes, absolutely. But as I said, it sure is nice to have friends to share that with. So we need our communities. Community is important. And Patricia could probably tell you stories that she's seen as a nurse of people who have suddenly been isolated, cut off from others for whatever reason. It is one of the biggest detriments to our health. So if you want to stay healthy and happy, make sure you are with your tribe. And you're always in search of new tribes, because there's new tribes out there, people who share common interests, who will take a walk with you, who will go and sit on the lake. And by the way, that's my happy place. That's my blue zone. We moved here in June of this year, and I live on a lake because I just have to be by the water. And I include that in my health regimen of meditation, prayer, and gratitude every single day my feet hit the floor, because I think you know my story. But I wanted to touch on a few other things. These blue zones can also be called longevity blue zones. And I've given you 2 articles. They're short reads. They're not terribly technical. I suggest that you all pick them up over your cup of tea or coffee and take a look through some of the other work of Dan Buettner and his colleagues. Because it turns out this ability to have longevity is not just in our genes. They referenced the Danish twin study. It's a very famous study. It was longitudinal, fairly big group, where they looked at twins and which ones lived longer versus others. And what they found out that it's your genetic makeup, right? That's why we study twins, because they're fascinating. They're genetically the same in many, many cases, or have so many similar traits. They found that only 20% of a person's longevity is due to their genetics. So when people say, oh, poo-poo, you're talking about these beautiful places in the world, of course people live longer. It's in their genes. That has been disputed and proven is not true. So we don't have to live by our genes alone. And in these 5 demographically confirmed areas, thanks to Dan Buettner and his work, where they have an exceedingly high ratio of centenarians, those people living over the age of 100. It's also brought us a new way to look at aging. Did you know that in the United States, an aged person, decrepit aged, used to be considered 85? No offense to our 80-year-olds who I look up to tremendously on this call today. We've moved that goalpost. It's now 90 years old. So through technology and better living and all these insights and research, we can live longer. The question always is, are we going to live healthier? And just one of the other things I want to bring you, this research has opened up a whole new language. You know, I'm in public health. We are always, I get really excited looking at ratios and population health, but it has brought us this idea of population longevity. So in one of the pieces I gave you, we have 2 new indices. One is centenarian population, and the other is centenarian prevalence. I think we're going to start to see more and more work done, and you should just know that those terms will be used. And the last thing I wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for as I bring John in and have some questions for him that we probably all share mutually and want to hear from John, and I'll get there in a moment. I don't want to overlook the Power 9. We haven't talked about that yet. But out of Buettner's work, they came up with the Power 9. And what they're kind of politely saying is, hey, folks, this isn't just about genetics. Let's get beyond that. It's not just about living in a gorgeous place in the world. It has to do with these common characteristics shared by all these people in this tribe. This aged group of people who live long, healthy, productive lives. So the Power Nine featured in Butner's review that I've given you the link to, I think you want to take that. And I think maybe you want to incorporate it in your discussions about Immunical, because it lists things like all these people share these traits in common. They know how to move naturally. They know how to live with a purpose in their life. They know how to downshift when it matters. That's really important. The working, 20 hours a day for me, that ended a long time ago. Got to tell you all that. They also incorporate a rule called harihachabu, which is a Japanese Okinawan expression that says only eat till you're 80% full, then push away, get away from the table. There's a plant slant, absolutely. It doesn't say you have to go all vegan, but there is a plant domination in the diets. Wine at 5, that's my most exciting one, but it has to be Sardinian wine. Very, very high in antioxidants because of the soil there. And last but not least, you have to feel that sense of belonging, and your loved ones have to come first. And the last part is you have to belong to the right tribe. And how often have we found ourselves maybe in the company of people that we've suddenly said, negativity, or I've outgrown this. So yes, we can create our own blue zones and be in charge of our health destiny. But to have like-minded people like we share in this group, in this tribe, and I have to tell you, I am so honored and privileged that I share a lot of this philosophy with my good friend, John. So hi, John.
Hi, Nancy.
How are you today?
Good, thank you.
We're all really excited that you're here. And I know you've looked a lot at this topic. So I have some questions for you, if I may. And we may veer off the topic, but it'll be short. But I know you've thought about this and can contribute to some practical things for our group. So my first question is, how do you think each of us can create our own version of a healthy, sustainable blue zone? But I also want you to touch on generational influences and then the environment. I think starting here will also help us get into a discussion about social cohesion and networking. Do you think a person on their own has the best chance of maintaining and sustaining health? Or how much do we really need each other, John? Talk to us.
Well, there's so many examples across society where we see the importance of the team, whether you're talking business, science, sports, and, even the formation of Immunitech required a team. Initially, Dr. Buning's doing his early research required a team in collaboration with Dr. Kongshav. And so surrounding yourself with people that will help get you there and stay there, including creating your own blue zone, is probably one of the most critical factors to success. And waking up in the morning with a purpose and a commitment to your group to stick with your plan and your mindset is something that, to me, will lead to sustainable success, because it's all about what is sustainable over time, not typically the trap that you fall into, which is I'm going to go into the blue zone and 3 weeks later you're back into the red zone. So it's all about sustainability, having people to support you, and also you feeling a commitment to not let those people down, I think is critical.
Well said. So give us a little bit more about your personal insights into the blue zones and what characteristics help us really the most to shape our own environment. How do we do that best?
It's this could be applied to anything, including the blue zone. And, I've been very fortunate to have great mentors in my life and to be exposed to and around a lot of successful business people, scientific people. And the key characteristic that I've seen in these people when they're looking at something new or embarking on something new is they research it and become literate on the subject down to the minutia. So they know exactly what they're entering into and become fully conversant on the subject. And that's, in essence, what I did when, I started with Immunitech many, many years ago and was thrust in a situation where I had to sit with Dr. Bunos and, not knowing anything. So I took it upon myself to study as much as I could about the subject. And I think if you want to create a successful blue zone, you should do the same thing and research it as much as possible. The second thing, is a universal trait that, again, applies to anything, that you can do all the planning you want, be as conversant as you want. But if you don't have the discipline to adhere to the things that are laid out in terms of living that life, then it's all going to be for naught, and that's the downfall of many successful people or many successful athletes is, when times get tough, or, it's raining outside, they lack the discipline to go out and do the training required. The same thing here, that being in the blue zone doesn't mean, you're going to enjoy it all the time. And sometimes you're going to have to make some tough decisions and some sacrifices to do that. But that's what will get you through and make it sustainable over time. So, when we talk about the blue zone, and, I read it, did background reading just like you did, they talk about living a life of longevity. So that's not going into the blue zone, going out of the blue zone, going into the blue zone, going out of the blue zone. If you're going to live a life of longevity, that's exactly what it means. And it requires making some choices sometimes. So that's how I would look at it.
Well said, as always, John. And I want to touch on something you said, because I think it's important. I know that my workout every day takes me 2 hours. And sometimes I don't have the full 2 hours. It's like being online and having to pay for something, and then you realize you have no money and no credit cards. You don't want to run into that problem in your day. So sometimes I have to plan that maybe I only have a half hour this morning, but later on I'm coming back to it, and I'll find that other change that's somewhere rattling around in the deep recesses of my purse or my pockets. So it's not shortchanging yourself. And I don't apologize for it anymore. I used to, but now I say, between this time and this time, I am just not available. And I'm not embarrassed to admit that. So thank you for bringing that out. I'm going to ask you this next one. What's the role of Immunical in this conversation? How does it contribute? And why is it such a vital component in this context?
Part of this journey I was on, I look back and I was so fortunate to be able to spend time with people like Dr. Bunos and Dr. Droog. I mean, it was, as I say to people, it was like going to university every day and having a personal professor. And Dr. Droog, both Dr. Droog and Dr. Bunos gave me so many wonderful pearls of wisdom. And one of the things Dr. Droog said to me, as you know, he's one of the world experts in aging and what's called the redox physiology of aging. So he said to me, after exercise, Immunical is probably the second most important thing you can do to ensure a healthy aging process. And, if you look at physiologically what they're trying to do with the blue zone in terms of, the types of food they eat, aging is all about modulating what's called systemic inflammation. So one of Immunical's characteristics and one of its most potent tools is it mediates the inflammatory process, because you need some inflammation. An excess is not good, just like an excess of antioxidants is not good. So maintaining what's called this homeostasis, or this balanced redox state, is very, very important. And Dr. Droog wrote about how things can get out of whack, so to speak, that you become, you kind of morph into this pro-oxidant state, and there's many, many consequences to that, and unhealthy aging is one of the major consequences of that.
Very, very important reminder. Take your Immunical. What does Keith say? Only smart people take Immunical. I love that, Keith. I'm going to use that line. So, John, thank you again so much for being here and for sharing your insights. I do have one last question I want to ask you to round this out. Are there any other secrets you can share with us from the world of elite athletes? What characteristics, what traits have you seen? What else can we do and incorporate from that world?
Well, I mean, there's so many lessons that can be learned from sport, but what I find fascinating is how these great athletes, people like Tom Brady, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, how they get there is sort of the first chapter in the story, but it's more about sustainability. How do they stay there? How does their training evolve and their philosophy around science, sports, nutrition, etc., evolve as they grow as an athlete? Because it's a lot like the average person. In other words, when you're 18 or 19, you couldn't give 2 cents about what you're eating, because every day you wake up and you feel great, you have loads of energy. But then you realize that as you age, then you start to pay a price if you don't eat properly, you don't get enough sleep, and so you start to become more strategic about your choices. And so, studying these athletes, our work with Oracle, looking at the blood antioxidant value of these athletes and how important they are vis-a-vis risk to injury, risk to illness, apply to us as well. So, if you stay within the blue zone, then it's all about moderation and doing things that, each of which contributes to giving you the best chance of leading a healthy lifestyle and having a healthy aging process. And, if I think about, my work with Immunotech over time, I mean, I grew up in a blue zone. Now that I look at it, my parents created a blue zone for me. But I think Immunotech is the ultimate blue zone, because Immunotech, I mean, it's all about sharing and helping others, which is, very, very important. Also, in terms of, the product we work with, the philosophy we work with about living a healthy lifestyle, it's the ultimate launch point to, to creating your own blue zone. And so I think we can all feel very fortunate that we're part of this, because we didn't really have a name for it, but now we can call it, a blue zone company, a blue zone lifestyle, blue zone business, etc.
Love that. Well, John, as always, you're a wealth of knowledge. We love you and respect you and value you, and thank you for spending this time. I always thank you for the prep time that you and I do and kicking around some ideas. I learn from you every time I'm with you. And thank you. You're a blessing, as is this entire group. So thank you, tribe. And back to you, my tribal elder younger brother. Thank you for having me today and for being able to share this with John.
Well, thank you both, Dr. Nancy and John. And John, I do have two quick questions for you. One is, of course, I'm putting everybody on the spot today, and I know John Molson. I know he did something today. So what did you do today physically, my friend?
Well, I did 2 hours in the gym. Then I walked with my wife to the store and carried back 50 pounds of groceries. No, it's probably like 25 pounds. And then I actually quickly went on the bike to the park and hit on the tennis wall for half an hour, and then made it back here. Great.
And my other question, John, is about sarcopenia. If you want to just describe that, you and I discussed this a lot, but as we age, you and I included, now that we're in our 60s, this is becoming a big topic, and I know we've done a ton of research on it. Some people aren't familiar with it, so if you can just tell what it is and tell once again why they should take Immunical to avoid it.
Well, it's essentially, it was first described by Dr. Droog many, many years ago, and it essentially relates to an imbalance that causes a progressive loss of muscle mass beginning probably in the fourth decade of life. And in unhealthy aging, you see a progressive loss to the degree where it starts to compromise lifestyle, compromise quality of life. So his research was focused on supplementing with Immunical cysteine, and it actually, in many different models, disease models, including overtrained athletes, you can reverse it. Now, what's important about this, and what's important to understand is that as you lose that muscle mass, that's replaced by body fat. And the more body fat you have, the slower your metabolism comes. So it can become, in essence, like a snowball effect. And it also causes adverse signaling in the body. So that's why it's very important when we talk about aging and the importance of exercise and movement and resistance exercise to counteract that.
Great, great. And we see it a lot. I've been around masters sports now for a number of years, and it's funny because when I look at most masters athletes, they're not getting it because they're moving their bodies every day. They're training, they're training sport specific and also training in the gym, and most of them are eating right, supplementing right, etc. But the general population, you see it all the time. And, once again, immunical. I think we have one specific study, though, too, that Dr. Troe did. And I'm just forgetting which one it was because he did so many. Which one was that?
Well, all of our studies early on were focused on quality of life. And in certain studies, we looked at cachexia in very, very sick patients. And we were able to improve the resiliency of these patients and improve their, in the case of one patient population, the 6-minute walk test. So even that increase in muscle strength translates to a quicker 6-minute walk test than would normally be the case. So we've seen it affect the most fragile patient populations up to the world's greatest athletes. So when we talk about performance is a relative term across the spectrum.
Well, it's one bottom line, right? Take your Immunical. If there's nothing else you got off this call today, folks, take your Immunical each and every day. Thank you, John.
Hey, wait,
Thank you.
Not going to run away, John. All those years ago in 1996 when I did those first calls with Dr. Bunos, and I remember back in the day of the thermal fax machine, we got the study on Immunical where the animals that were given Immunical lived 30 to 50% longer than the ones that weren't. And I remember having that conversation with Dr. Bunos, says, that's great. When are we going to see the human studies? And you'll appreciate this. I'm in California. He's in Montreal. I can only visualize him laughing in his chair when I ask the question. That's great on the animals. When are we going to see the human studies? And Dr. Bunos' response to me was, Keith, longevity studies in humans take 50 years. You want to wait for the research. Hey, John, I think we're halfway through this open study, don't you, on longevity?
Yeah, I can explain that study to you because he explained it to me. He said, in essence, the reason they live 30, 50% longer is because they didn't succumb to age-related conditions because of improved immune function. So, that's a very important clue that we can apply to ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. We appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Hey, listen, we have one other great speaker.